Aboard the Goliath, command deck, post-battle. The stars were still littered with debris, burned-out husks of Dominion dreadnoughts and the shattered remains of Earth vessels alike. Rescue shuttles darted among the wreckage, their beacons blinking like fireflies in the dark. Captain Elisa Vance leaned over the tactical table, exhaustion lining her features, but her voice sharp as ever. Damage reports. Final tallies. 3 corvettes destroyed, 1 frigate lost, Commander Hayes replied grimly. The Ajax is crippled, but she'll limp back to Tok. Casualties? His throat caught. Too many. Vance's jaw tightened. She gave a curt nod and turned as the Zephyr's fang appeared on the main display. Battered, but still burning bright. Patch them through. The hollow flare of Static resolved into Captain Rallick Thren. His image flickered, but the weariness in his eyes was clear. You held them long enough for us to arrive, Vance said, her voice softer. That was no small feat. Rallick's mandibles flexed, a weary gesture of acknowledgement. We bought seconds that felt like hours, but seconds were enough. A silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken weight. Then Rallick leaned forward, his voice low and edged. Captain, they knew we would be here. Ryson said it himself. They were expecting us. That's no coincidence. Vance's gaze flicked to Hayes, then back. You're suggesting someone fed them our movements? I'm not suggesting. Rallick growled. I'm saying. No Dominion fleet just happens to be waiting in orbit of a dead hive world. They knew. Someone told them. The words hung like poison in the air. The bridge crew shifted uneasily. To accuse the Federation Council of betrayal was near treason. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Commander Hayes broke the silence. Captain, if the Dominion have infiltrated the Federation at that level... He trailed off, the thought too grim to finish. Vance's expression hardened. Then this war is far bigger than we imagined. She straightened, voice carrying with command again. Rallick, return your ship to dock with the Goliath. We'll regroup, tend the wounded, and report to High Command. But make no mistake, this changes everything. Rallick gave a slow nod, his eyes still burning with suspicion. Agreed. The battlefield is no longer just in the stars. It's in the shadows. The transmission cut. Vance stood in silence, staring at the drifting wreckage beyond the viewport. For the first time, the Dominion hadn't just struck with brute force. They had struck with foreknowledge, with cunning. And somewhere, within the Federation itself, a traitor had opened the door. The hull link snapped into place, Admiral Harlan's form casting long shadows across the chamber. His expression was smiling, until he saw the look on her face. Captain Vance, you have something to report? She didn't waste words. Admiral, we engaged Dominion vessels, casualties. 3 corvettes destroyed, 1 frigate lost. 1 destroyer heavily damaged. The Fang survived by a thread. Harlan frowned. Dominion vessels? We lost ships? That sector should be unknown to them. Vance's tone sharpened, steel creeping in. They were waiting. For us. Archlord Rysin hailed the Zephyr's Fang directly. Said he'd been expecting them. Admiral, they knew Thren would be here. Harlan's jaw tightened. Impossible. The Fang's assignment was classified. Even the crew wasn't briefed until hours before departure. Yet the Dominion did. Vance pressed. And they weren't fielding conventional craft. These were new, hybridized. Genetic analysis confirms bug DNA integrated into the hull. Our teams boarded 2 wrecks. Admiral, they were empty, no crew. Remote-directed, possibly psionic relay. For the first time in years, Harlan looked unsettled. His voice dropped. Empty ships. Grown. Not built. But how? The bugs were eradicated over 14 years ago. Vance's words cut sharper now. Exactly, sir. The Dominion somehow had bug remains all this time. Hidden, harvested, waiting. If they can weave bug DNA into ships, what else have they been splicing it into? A silence. Heavy. Both of them knew the implication. This wasn't just engineering. It was resurrection. Then Harlan's eyes narrowed, the steel returning to his voice. I don't know. But I have a feeling we're going to find out. The words hung heavy between them. Harlan leaned forward. Transmit every byte of data to Science Command. We'll assign a science vessel to meet up with the Goliath. Those wrecks are to be taken apart atom by atom. And Vance, if the Dominion knew about the Fang's route, then we may have a traitor sitting in the Federation Council itself. Until we know more, we play this close to the chest. Vance nodded. Understood, Admiral. And Captain, Harlan's voice lowered, dangerous now. If they wanted the Fang, then Sinclair may be their next target. His escort would be doubled immediately. The channel snapped shut, leaving Vance alone with the cold hum of the Goliath, and the knowledge that the war they thought they understood had just shifted into something far darker. The ship still hummed with the aftertaste of battle, even as the stars blurred into jump. Archlord Raisin stood rigid in the narrow light of the corridor, every panel of the living hull pulsing with the ship's slow breath. He keyed a private channel and watched the hollow seam flare to life, an impossible geometry of light that fractured into the image of a Vadran Grand Lord. Raisin bowed low, claws touching the deck, refusing to meet the Overlord's small, dark eyes. "My lord," he intoned, voice flat but measured. The Grand Lord's tone was a cold blade. "I presume your mission to kill Captain Fren was a success." Silence stretched. In that thin beat, Raisin felt the ship's tone change, as if the hull itself were listening for his answer. A cold pressure closed around his mind, real and crushing, telepathic fingers tightening, not at his throat, but inside his skull. Fear, sharp and immediate, crept along his mandibles for the first time in years. "My lord," he began, then forced the words out with controlled cadence. "We did not manage to kill Rallick Thren. The humans, they arrived unexpectedly. A supercarrier-class vessel intervened minutes after our assault. It was none other than the Goliath." The Grand Lord's ire flared like a nova. "You dare come before me with failure? Goliath or not, you commanded 12 of our hybrid vessels." The telepathic grip twisted, and Raisin felt the breath tear from him. He kept his head bowed. "My lord, please, forgive. Not all is lost." The new vessels performed as designed. We destroyed numerous support craft and forced them to bleed. The flare of anger faded, replaced by an unnerving calm. "Humans bleed, Archlord. That alone is nothing. Did you give me victory or only scraps?" Raisin straightened a fraction. "Scraps, perhaps. But invaluable scraps, my lord. They believe they have won. Yet the data we gathered will refine the next generation. How many ships did you lose?" "All," Raisin admitted. The word hung like a weight. "All but the command vessel. We salvaged logs, neural lattice samples, genomic residues. They will inform the next iteration." The Grand Lord's gaze sharpened. "And what will the humans learn from the shells you left them?" "They may probe them," Raisin answered carefully, eyes flicking to the glowing veins in the ship's wall. "But not in time. Replicating bug grafting is beyond them. They will not comprehend the gift the bugs left us. Not before we move." The pressure in his skull lingered, a leash held taut. "You had better be right," the Grand Lord whispered, every syllable like ice. "For your sake, Archlord, your continued existence depends on it." Raisin inclined his head, the weight of expectation pressing harder than the telepathic grip itself. The grip on his mind vanished as the hollow snapped away. The corridor hummed on. Raisin stood a moment longer beneath the pulsing wall, tasting victory and loss in equal measure, knowing that what he had loosed into the void had opened a door that could not be closed, and that his next moves would have to be quieter, faster, and far more ruthless. Several hours later, the Goliath was a hive of controlled chaos. Rescue shuttles ferrying survivors, medtechs triaging burned faces, and recovery crews crawling over drifting wreckage. The void still glowed with smouldering debris. The comm panel chirped, and a new voice pushed through the static, bright and eager.
"Goliath, this is Science Vessel Hypatia. We hear you have some new ships for us to study."
Commander Hayes cracked a tired smile.
"Hypatia, I think you nerds are going to love what we've pulled out of the void."
A beat, then the Hypatia replied, all professional excitement. "We heard. Rumors you suspect the Dominion spliced bug DNA to hulls. Astonishing if true. How bad were your losses? I heard we took a hit." A hush slid across the Goliath's comms. Captain Vance answered, voice steady but raw with fatigue. "Confirmed losses so far, 3 corvettes destroyed. 1 frigate lost. 1 destroyer heavily damaged. Casualties are still being tallied. 27 confirmed fatalities at last count. Could have been worse. Most crews made the pods." "Sorry for your loss, Captain," the Hypatia said quietly. "Any loss is a loss for humanity. We'll be there ASAP. We'll strip those hulls to their marrow and find anything we can exploit. Their deaths won't be in vain." Vance's reply was short, iron, and grateful. "Bring your drones and your best xenobiologists. You'll have a cordon and full access. But nothing leaves the wrecks without command clearance." "Understood," the Hypatia answered. "We'll be en route." Hypatia out. The channel clicked dead. Around the deck, the work resumed, grim, efficient, determined. The Goliath would bury her dead, patch her wounds, and hand the bones of the enemy over to the people who could make sense of them. If anything could turn this shock into advantage, the scientists aboard the Hypatia would find it. As Commander Eleanor Hartwell crossed the breach, the wreck's corridors were dim, lit only by the glow of drones sweeping ahead. What should have been bare alloy was threaded with something wrong. Metal ribs fused with fibrous strands, veins of faintly glowing fluid seeping through cracked panels. The ship breathed in the silence. Hartwell raised a hand. "Drone 1, thermal scan, microsampler, full archive mode." The first readout came in seconds. Nucleotide fragments, protein structures, unmistakable. Hartwell's jaw tightened. "Cross-check against bug genome archives." A pause. Then the tech's voice hushed. "Match confirmed, Commander." "Integrated. This hull carries bug DNA." For a moment, no one spoke. Just the faint hum of the drones. Hartwell's reply was clipped, professional. "Tag it. Lock it down. Nothing leaves containment. Cold storage only." She keyed her uplink. "Hypatia, this is Hartwell. Confirmation on the theory. Dominion vessels are hybrid grown. Bug genetic material is present in the structure. Prepare full isolation labs." "Copy, Commander. 40 minutes out," came the reply. Hartwell pressed deeper into the wreck. The bridge was hollow. No stations, no crew. Just an array of strange nodal clusters webbed across the ceiling. She crouched beside one, brushing her scanner across the surface. Neural resonance spiked, then faded. "Not life support," she murmured. "Remote lattice. Command relays. Remote lattice control. This ship wasn't crewed." One of her junior researchers swallowed audibly. So, they weren't just inspired by the bugs, they're trying to become them. Hartwell's gaze lingered on the webbed nodes, cold dread settling in her gut. She keyed another burst to the Hypatia and the Goliath. Bug DNA confirmed. Ship operated via remote lattice. Assume PSI component. Do not power under any circumstance. She stood, the flicker of containment lights painting the wreck in red. Catalog everything. Priority 1, lattice samples. Then hull polymers. Move fast, but don't get clever. These things may be dead, but they were built to think. Aboard the Hypatia, white-suited scientists moved with purpose. Commander Eleanor Hartwell met them at the airlock with 2 priority orders. No lattice powered, and a full Psi-Shields envelope around the containment bay. Inside the lab, the wreck sections lay in grids of magnetic clamps and sensor arrays. The nodes they pulled from the hull sat on sterile pedestals, webs of polymer and pale tissue. Hartwell watched as a tech, Lieutenant Rios, eased a passive probe toward a dead relay. Remember, no power, Hartwell reminded. Passive reads only until we understand the lattice. If anything spikes, back off and seal. They began with the obvious. EM sweeps across the radio to sub-millimeter bands. Nothing coherent. Then quantum handshake probes. Again, noise. Hours of sterile failure, frustration edged the room. Try a low-frequency sweep, Rios suggested. Something shallow, coupled with bioresonance sampling. If it's hybrid, the carrier might be buried under biological harmonics. Hartwell nodded. They dialed the scanner down to long wavelengths and overlaid a biospectral filter tuned to the archived bug protein harmonics. The readouts blinked. A faint, repeating modulation crawled into view, a whisper on the edge of their instruments. Intermittent, drowned in cosmic background. But there, they iterated. Small amplitude changes, phase offsets, a different set of neural probes mimicking insect neuropil patterns. Each adjustment pulled the signal into slightly better resolution. Each failure taught them what not to do. Trial and error stacked into small victories. On the 3rd series of runs, a pattern snapped clear. A low-frequency carrier, neuromodulation locked to an ultra-narrowband harmonic riding atop a quantum entanglement handshake. The lab feed displayed it as a thin spike at a frequency band that should be empty on Federation charts. A signature Hartwell labeled with a grim little smile, Theta Phase Resonance. Got it, Rios breathed. It's not just EM. There's a psionic imprint riding the carrier. Modulation that corresponds to known neural firing patterns. It's a hybrid protocol. Electromagnetic carrier, psionic encoding. Hartwell felt the cold clarity of the discovery. So the lattice broadcasts in a band ordinary radios miss. Then overlays a neuroharmonic that translates into command signals for the grafted tissue. They've bridged biology and physics. They pushed further. Using a psi blanket to stabilize the lab's field, they filtered the carrier and replayed a passive capture through a synthetic neural emulator. The emulator responded with a ghost ping, an echo of command traffic. Ping. Acknowledgement. Waveform sync. Not a message a human could read, but a handshake. They had the protocol. Can we jam it? A junior researcher asked. The question rattled the room. Hartwell didn't answer immediately. She watched the spectral spike, the delicate lattice of spikes that formed the ship's voice. We can watch it now, she said finally. We can retort, decode, and possibly spoof elements of it. Jamming is dangerous. If the lattice is psionically linked, it could trigger fail states in the hardware. But monitoring will let us track other activations, and spoofing, if we're careful, could blind an active shit long enough to isolate it. She keyed a secure uplink to the Goliath. Found. Hybrid neurocarrier. Theta phase. Passive captures complete. Recommend continued monitoring. Develop spoofing protocols. Strict no power on samples until we test countermeasures. There was a short silence on the bridge feed. Then Vance's voice, flat and unstoppable. Good. Prioritize spoofing research. If we can mimic their handshake, we can stop them from talking to each other. Hartwell exhaled, shoulders tightening. The lab around her hummed back to life with purpose. Trial and error had yielded a map, a frequency, a protocol, a way in. It wasn't a weapon yet, but it was a direction. And in a war where the enemy had blurred the line between living and machine, direction was everything. Scene at Hypatia, controlled lab, Psi-isolated testing chamber. A few days had passed. Every test had been successful. Now, they were ready to apply power to see if their protocols could interface with living Dominion tissue. In the center of the white containment room, a chunk of ship flesh lay on a sterile table, threaded with probes and surrounded by psi dampeners. The tissue pulsed faintly, dormant but not dead. "Ready, Commander," came the voice over comms. Hartwell stood behind the glass, arms folded. "Good. Let's power this thing up and see if our methods work." "Slow and steady," Rios added, fingers hovering over the console. The power ramped up, gradual, controlled, readouts stabilized, no spikes, no anomalies. They initiated the handshake. Nothing happened. The room fell quiet. Disappointment flickered across the team's faces. Then, pop. The tissue convulsed, bubbling violently. Lime green fluid oozed from the center, hissing as it hit the sterile table. Silence stretched. Then the room exploded. Spined tentacles burst from the oozing mass, lashing out in every direction. They dove into power conduits, wrapping around cables, piercing sensor arrays. Alarms screamed. "Shut this thing down!" Hartwell shouted. "Close the containment!" Emergency kill switches slammed into place. Psi dampeners surged. The room flooded with containment foam and electromagnetic null fields. The tentacles writhed once, twice, then fell limp. The lab was silent again. Everyone stared at the sealed chamber, stunned, breathless. Hartwell's voice cut through the quiet, low and grim. "Next time, we isolate the nervous tissue first.